Unless you've been living under a rock for the last couple of weeks, you probably know by now that there is very likely to be a new edition of Warhammer the Horus Heresy coming from GW in the very near future. You've probably seen the Horus Heresy website, the news, the leaks, all of that stuff. What I haven't seen anybody talk about is the important but maybe self-interested question of what this new edition might mean for Legions Imperialis. And that's what I want to talk about today. We're going to talk about what this new edition could mean, both for Age of Darkness in general, as well as how those effects might precipitate further effects on our game, Legions Imperialis. So, just briefly, I think the main things that the new edition means for Age of Darkness, that is the 28 millimeter Horus Heresy game, is there's likely to be a new rule set. It seems like there's also a campaign book. It seems like this new edition is closely associated with Istvan and something to do with the Drop Site Massacre. And of course, there are new miniatures coming. And lastly, I think it is also important that this new edition is coinciding with sort of the tail end of Warhammer 40,000 10th edition. So those are the main things that I think will come about because of this new edition, the main changes. And let's take a look at each one of those individually in the next part of the video. The first and probably the most important ramification of a new edition of Warhammer the Horus Heresy is a new set of rules. That's certainly the implication. And I think there are two paths that Games Workshop can pursue here. The first, and I think the most likely, is that they are going to do probably a completely new edition of the rules, which means a complete revision. It's hard to say what that might bring. Maybe alternating activations. It's too early to tell, I think, what GW might change about the Horus Heresy. The other alternative is that they will simply introduce minor changes and keep the main core structure of the game as it is currently written, as it currently exists. And this probably isn't what they're going to do, simply because it doesn't seem like that's how Games Workshop operates these days. Unfortunately, this is the alternative that I think most people want out of the new edition. Most people that I follow or I sort of observe on YouTube and in the Warhammer community don't really seem to want a complete overhaul of the Horus Heresy rules. They just want a few things changed. And that seems very familiar to me as a player of Legions Imperialis. I really don't think there's a lot that needs to be changed. Just a few tweaks here and there, like we saw with the most recent errata, which was certainly a hopeful point for me in terms of Games Workshop's writing style and editing style. Seeing that errata for Legions Imperialis was really reassuring. And I don't think that's the route they're going to take, even though I think that's what most people want. I think most people want some balance and points revisions. I think dreadnoughts probably need to be brought down in power. Vehicles need to be helped some. They just seem a little bit too weak. And maybe that's where we're seeing the addition of disintegrator weapons as kind of a way to get around the dreadnought spam, which perhaps suggests that maybe there are going to be fewer major changes if they're trying to balance things by the introduction of new weapons and so on. I still think in general that this is going to be a major revision of the rules. Um, what does that mean for Legions Imperialis? As I said, many people seem to want minor changes. I think, do I think that is, that a new edition is going to drive people away? Honestly, no, I don't. And that's for two reasons. The first reason is that people who don't like the new edition are probably still just going to play the old version of the game. And there are also those people who, even if they don't necessarily like the new edition, are still going to play it because it is the new version. It has new releases, new rules, and so on. And there's something nice about participating in that refreshed game system. So, will we see more people moving from Horus Heresy to Legions Imperialis? I don't think so. Um, just because I think a lot of those people that do enjoy Horus Heresy and are interested in Legions Imperialis are probably already playing. And those people who don't play Legions Imperialis, I don't see them abandoning 28 millimeter Horus Heresy to come play Legions Imperialis. So the new rules, I don't think there's going to be too much of an effect on our community from the rules side of this new edition. It also seems like there's a strongly narrative focus around this new edition. And I say that just because it just seems like there is a narrative element of the advertising, of the packaging, and so on. Like they're calling the new edition Saturnine, the sort of the additional material in the advertising campaign, the Horus Hearsay website. Just all seems like it's focusing more on the setting, which I think is great. I mean, that's part of the charm of the Horus Heresy is the setting, the narrative, the characters, and so I think it's good that they're focusing more on that. And I think that also means good things for Legions Imperialis, right? Because the campaign books so far seem to have gone hand in glove or hand in hand at the very least. We had the Dark Mechanicum book release after the Martian Civil War book, and we had similar offerings elsewhere. So my thought is that this new focus on the Istvan campaign, and I'm not quite sure whether this is the actual drop site massacre or something afterwards. The elite element of the Salamander army, the fact that it's the Saturnine Terminators and the Saturnine Dreadnought pattern, maybe suggests to me that this is maybe a strike force being sent down after the massacre as some kind of retributive operation. I don't know. But whether it's the Horus Heresy book is sort of after or during the massacre, I think to me it suggests that the next expansion that we get may have something to do with Istvan, which I think is very exciting. I'm happy to see some of these maybe more famous battles and engagements come to the fore for Legions Imperialis, because that's really where it shines, right? Is these large scale, massive engagements. Although their Legions Imperialis not really that massive, but it's much bigger than what we find in the regular Horus Heresy 28 millimeter game. So in general, the new campaign book, which I think is coming, either it's part of the main rule book, which I think is suggested by the fact that it's called Horus Heresy Saturnine, or maybe it'll be something separate. I think that suggests to me that Legions Imperialis may see a Istvan campaign book coming soon. Maybe the most obvious thing about the new edition is the new box that supposedly we are getting, at least according to the leaked photos. And this shows, of course, the Saturnine Terminators and the Saturnine Pattern Dreadnought. Now, whether you like those models or not, I'm going to leave that aside for now. I know there have been mixed opinions. What I will say, though, is that is probably the most direct correspondence between Legions Imperialis and the Horus Heresy is the shared miniatures lines. So the fact that the Horus Heresy is getting these new Saturnine Terminators, these new Saturnine Dreadnought patterns, it seems likely to me that we will see these at some point in the future. Now, I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, it's always great to get new stuff for Legions Imperialis. However, I think new Terminators and new Dreadnoughts are not exactly what we need from a Legions Imperialis standpoint. We already have lots of Dreadnoughts that are very good. And infantry, well, I am a big proponent of infantry as part of a complete army in Legions Imperialis. I don't know how I feel about too many different kinds of infantry because I think they are simply, at this scale, this kind of game, it's very hard to meaningfully differentiate types of infantry just because you don't have the same granular detail that you do in Warhammer Horus Heresy the Age of Darkness. We have, a much more nuanced weapon profiles and statistics and so on. Whereas in Legions Imperialis, that's much more difficult. Um, so I don't know. Always good to have new releases. Whether we're going to get those sooner or later, hard to say. There's still those rumors going around about the the new release being focused on the Blood Angels, about demons. I think it's Cygnus Prime. I forget now. Um, so does that mean that those rumors are false and we're getting an Istvan book instead? Again, it's hard to say. My instinct is that the writing teams are going to try to keep these the two lines, the Horus Heresy and Legions Imperialis, those books, so as close together as possible to make their the research and the writing burden easier. Whether that will happen, I don't know. So yeah, I imagine this new edition means we'll see new miniatures. Good or bad, I leave it to you to decide. The last thing I want to talk about is the fact that this new edition for the Horus Heresy comes at the tail end of the life of Warhammer 40,000 10th edition, or at least that's what I get from my observations of the YouTube channels that I follow and keep in touch with. It seems like Games Workshop is ramping up for a new edition for Warhammer 40,000. And I think it's interesting that they're planning to drop this new edition of Warhammer the Horus Heresy just before that. Is that to draw people in to tide them over until the next edition of Warhammer 40k? Could be. We know, of course, that Games Workshop makes a lot of their business off of new releases, and they want to keep the hype. I don't really like that word, but they want to keep the hype going, and they want people to stay engaged. And so I don't know how much this new edition is intended to be an improvement of the game, or is it just a way to sell a new box um, and revise the edition? Does it mean that the Horus Heresy is now going to be on a similar edition cycle to Warhammer 40k? That's certainly what it suggests. I think it's been 3 years since the original release of the Age of Darkness, so that's kind of hard to argue against. Seems like that will be the pattern going forward. Not sure how the regular Horus Heresy players are going to feel about that. I think the Horus Heresy players that I know like the stability. They appreciate the wargaming focus of the Horus Heresy as it stands. And they like, I think, becoming proficient with the current set of rules, developing their player skill. I'm sure that's extant to some degree with Warhammer 40k, but it seems like Horus Heresy focuses more on that the nuance a little bit. I'm not experienced with Warhammer 10th edition, so don't come after me too much in the comments for saying that. But um, I, that's the impression that I get, that this is the start of an edition cycle for the Horus Heresy. Now, what does that mean for Legions Imperialis? I mean, I certainly do not want to see that come to our game. I I'm happy with the rule set as it is. I think it just needs some balancing here and there, and just some more regular support of questions and uncertainties that exist in the rules. Of course, I don't expect Legions Imperialis to ever go to a edition cycle like Warhammer 40k or what seems to be happening to Horus Heresy, just because it's such a niche game, right? Horus Heresy, from what I've heard, is now the second best-selling game that GW has. Surprise, people like Space Marines. So I don't think that means anything for Legions Imperialis. I think we're going to still see a focus on expansion books like we have so far, and like all of the specialist games seem to be doing up till now. I mean, this is how Necromunda operates. This is how Adeptus Titanicus operated. Uh, so I don't see why Legions Imperialis would deviate from that pattern. So I don't think we have anything to worry about. So stay the course. We still don't even know necessarily if this is really a new edition for Warhammer 40k, or excuse me, for Horus Heresy. Maybe it's just a new box and they're just teasing everybody with this Horus Heresy website and all this stuff. Maybe it's just a new Battle Force box and there's not even going to be a new rule set. That would be really, I don't know if it would be funny or frustrating. Probably for, if I was a player of Horus Heresy Age of Darkness, I would be frustrated if that was the case. I'm still not convinced it's not the case, but I think the preview is tomorrow. So I think we'll find out one way or another very soon. So those are my thoughts about the impending release of Warhammer Age of Darkness, or Saturnine, um, a potential new edition. We kind of went over a couple of the major things that I thought would be added, the new rules, a possible campaign book, new miniatures, and how they may affect Legions Imperialis going forward. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.